Yeah, semester two. Yeah, perfect. I think that would be to be separate would be great. But I don't know how many of them are here, so that's Okay. All right. Do you sense to just wait another moment or two?
Yeah, to 5 past.
I don't know how many people are outside. I'll just have a look outside. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a world frequently affected by change, crisis, and increasing polarization. Whether in our schools, our universities, or in public discourse, we're now finding people are more opposed to each other than ever before. On both sides of the issue, there are arguments for and against, and social media and algorithms are feeding our desires to be right. With many major political systems having elections this year, we could be at a turning point across the world. Closer to home, we may find ourselves triggered by comments and arguments said by colleagues, professors, and even family members. How can we engage in effective socio-political discourse? Welcome to this second day of the EU Business Forum here at FH Burgenland. And we would like to welcome you all for joining us here, and for many of you, a second time. Before we begin, we would also like to thank those who have put together this entire event, several students of the Bachelor of International Relations. They include Ferenc Banfai, Oliver Haider, Adisa Caronesi, Lida Notch, and Anna Schefberger. Please give them a round of applause, and for their professor, Johannes Breit. We would also like to acknowledge our program directors for European Studies, Dr. Gerda Furic-Fiegel, and our International Business Relations, Dr. Tonka Zemler-Matosic, and both of those who will now give us some welcome and opening words. Please welcome Dr. Tonka and Dr. Gerda.
Welcome at the University of Applied Sciences, Burgenland. Welcome to our event, which is the most important event of our business department, the European Business Forum Burgenland. In earlier days, we called it Eisenstädter Europatage. A very warm welcome to our guests who are joining us online. You know my name, I'm Tonka Zemler-Matosic, head of the Bachelor's Degree Program, International Business Relations. And the theme of our conference is trigger points in political discourse, in political discussion. Why did we choose this topic? Gerda, Gerda is our Vice Director of the University of Applied Sciences, and she is the head of the Master's Program, European Studies, Management of EU Projects. Gerda, please.
Thank you, Tonka. And good morning to all of you. Nice to see you. Why did we choose this topic? Well, who haven't ever experienced it on a family table or in a group of friends? You discuss about a topic and you find yourself in the middle of a conflict. So we thought, let's focus on this topic. Yesterday we started the event, and today, on the second day, we explore the question, what can we still talk about without ending up in a conflict? In liberal democracies, we are increasingly confronted with polarization in public discourse. Instead of talking to each other, we are talking about each other. Positions are presented in a pointed manner, and the chances to reach a compromise are reduced.
However, this has effects on the socio-political discourse, which are also very important, not only for political systems, but also for the business environment. This is why we are broadening our view today. We will reflect the issue from a political point of view, on the one hand, and on the other hand, from the business point of view, from the perspective of companies.
So, finally, before we really start with the topic and we hand over to David again, let me have some word of thanks to the ones who supported or went our cooperation partners. First of all, it's the Information Office of the European Parliament who supported us for the event yesterday mainly. It's the Europe Direct Burgenland, it's the Federation of the Austrian Industries in Burgenland, and last but not least, the Austrian Leadership Association Burgenland, and we welcome Johannes Ernst, who is the deputy of this association in Burgenland. Very warm welcome, Johannes. But now, have an exciting event today. Ask as many as possible to the experts on the panel, and we wish you a very interesting morning session.
Thank you, Gerda and Tonka. For those of you who do not know me, my name is David Corcoran, and I am a faculty member here at FH Burgenland in the business department. And my area of expertise is in English international business communication. To give you an outline of our program this morning, we're going to shortly hear from Markus Pausch, our keynote speaker for today, followed by a short break and a Kahoot game. So if you have your mobiles ready, we will be playing Kahoot before the break. And after that, we will have a discussion round on conflict versus consensus, where Markus Rausch will be joined by Martina Morell and Albert Hansen. Afterwards, we do invite you to a buffet. So if we're good, we get to eat and drink downstairs a little bit, where you can again mix with our speakers, guests, and also, of course, with each other. So our keynote speaker this morning is Mr. Markus Pausch, who is a professor at FH Salzburg in the Department of Applied Social Sciences with a focus on social innovation, democracy, and the future of Europe. He is a consultant and also the chairman of the Association Democracy and Dialogue, which is an international network that works for the strengthening of democratic dialogue. The title of his keynote speech today is Polarization: Trigger Points, Strategies and Consequences for Democracy. Please welcome Mr. Markus Pausch.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, David. Thank you, the organizers, for the invitation. It's an honor for me to be here and to talk about polarization. Some of you already know me from my class, where we have already talked a little bit about polarization. So you might find some aspects that you already know. However, it's hopefully interesting to discuss it in this context. So I want to start with a short impression that I have, or a short story, a question that I'm thinking about myself for many years now, actually, and it has to do with smoking. You know, when I arrived today in front of the university, there were some people, a few students smoking, and inside the house nobody was smoking. You know, when I was a student, there was no smoking law or anti-smoking law at universities, so I could still smoke inside the universities, and we even had professors, and some of you might remember, who smoked in their offices, and some even during exams. So, why do I talk about that? In September 2012, at Frankfurt railway station, an incident occurred. A man from Berlin had repeatedly pointed out to a man from Stuttgart that smoking was prohibited at the railway station. This led to a heated argument. The smoker reportedly pushed the non-smoker onto the track, where the other one lay slightly injured. He had to be taken to hospital. The smoker was arrested. These and similar episodes and arguments happened frequently, especially at the beginning of the strict smoking laws in Europe. But there was no political polarization as we know it from the last years. However, according to a Eurostat survey, around 20% of population in the EU smoke every day. And there are a few more percent who smoke occasionally. So I would say this is a relevant figure. But where is the polarization about it? Is there something like political polarization? I wouldn't find it on the agenda. I wouldn't find it in the media, at least not in the moment. So why do we hear and read relatively little about it? I can tell you that I don't have the answer. But it might accompany us through this first presentation, and maybe at the end we get an idea about why there is not such a political polarization concerning smoking laws. So the question arises, why are some topics so polarizing and others not? I don't want to promise an answer, as I said, but maybe an approximation in showing and discussing a few trigger points and some results that we know from polarization research. So I want to start with a definition. As usually we start with definitions, because if we talk about polarization, I think there is one thing that we should not mix up. Polarization is not division. It's not the same thing as division. We can read a lot about division in our societies in the last years, and you will find many headlines if you go through the newspapers and a Google search, and you will very often find the term division. And even in the social sciences, in political science, in sociology, there is a discussion if we can talk about division or polarization and what the differences are. And I would say there is one important difference between division and polarization that has to do with the dynamic of polarization. Division is something that is static. If you are divided, you have two camps who don't mix up. But polarization is a dynamic process. And it's more about a discourse phenomenon than about camps who are forever divided. Yeah. So I would say we have four criteria, four characteristics of polarization. The first one is obviously the discrepancy of opinions about a certain topic or issue. The next one is group formation. So group formation does not mean that we can divide society in two camps, but group formation is around the points, the topoi of a discourse. Those who are in these groups are aware of this polarization. Then purism means that at the poles of the discussion, people cannot take a mediate position. So they cannot take a conciliatory position because they are convinced of their own opinion. And then there is the fourth criteria, that is political struggle. So if we talk about political polarization, you can have many cases where the first 3 points are fulfilled, but it's not yet a political polarization if it's not the last point, the political struggle that is included. Now, if you think about our pluralist societies, and if you think about all your different experiences, your backgrounds, your life experiences, your worldviews, your religious faith, and so on, you will find many cases, probably, where the first 3 points are fulfilled. So an atheist would probably not have a conciliatory position with someone who is a believer. But still, this is not today, depending on the concrete situation, but in general, it's not something that is on the agenda of political polarization. At least if we talk about European countries. So polarization also does not mean that it's equal, that the groups are equal in size. As I said, I understand it more as a dynamic process, a discourse phenomenon around political topics. And just one more example to stress or emphasize the 4 characteristics and the importance of the 4th one. Think about vaccination and think back 10 years. Then you will find many people in our society who did not want to vaccinate. It was no problem. It was not on the political agenda. But with the crisis, with the pandemic, it became a political topic, and it suddenly led to a strong polarization. So if we look back to the history of our European states, then we will find that we have many examples of polarization. And it is very important to note that polarization is part and parcel of pluralistic societies as we know them today. That's what I said already. So it is by no means always just a threat to democracy. And this becomes even clearer if we look back in history, because in history we can see that polarization can help to develop or to improve democracy. So historically, almost all democratization processes have also been linked to polarization. Quite simply because those in power did not want to give up their privileges voluntarily. Look at these pictures and you will find the examples. Women's suffrage is an example. The labor movement is an example. Civil rights movement is an example. So you can see that polarization was necessary in many cases in history to bring more democracy into our world and even to change authoritarian regimes or monarchies into democracies. And in polarization research, we therefore distinguish between 2 forms of polarization. The one that we would, from a democratic point of view, call the benign or democracy-promoting polarization, and the other one, the pernicious polarization that threatens democracy. So here you can see that we have this way from benign polarization to pernicious polarization, and you can also see that we will focus today on the pernicious forms of polarization, because in recent years we have seen dangerous forms of polarization taking hold, and this is very often associated with the end of dialogue, with increasing aggression, with an effective polarization in which the representatives of the opposing opinions are seen as enemies. And we will now take a closer look at this dangerous form of polarization. And I would first look at the topics that bring us together here, I would say so, because during the last years, polarization mainly turned around, I would say, three issues, although not exclusively, but mainly. So, COVID-19, migration, climate policy, they spring to mind when we think about polarization. And, well, there are also other issues that are more or less polarizing in some countries, such as abortion in some countries, or unemployment policy, poverty, and so on. But these three are very, very strong, and probably the strongest issues concerning polarization. So the question arises as to why these topics polarized so strongly and more strongly than others, like, for example, the smoking and non-smoking question. I would say that the three issues revolve around security, identity, and freedom. So you can see, obviously, COVID was an existential threat to our lives. It came unexpectedly, and people feared for their lives and for their mere existence. The same can be said about the climate crisis. We know that all the perspectives that we have and all the prognosis for the next decades tell us that we will not be able to live our lives as we know them. Probably due to the climate crisis, we need to change our way of life. And this threatens not only our existence and the existence of the planet, but it threatens our identity, our way of life. And also it has an impact on our freedom. So how can we continue living the way we live with these threats and phenomena? And then the third example is migration. Now, many of you would probably say we cannot put these three things under one umbrella because there are two existential threats, COVID and the climate crisis, and there is migration. Migration is not an existential threat, of course, and it is not a dangerous phenomenon. It's something that is immanent to humanity, but still there are some people who fear migration and who fear that migration could be a threat to their way of life, to their identity. And then we are here in this identity topic, which is a very sensitive one. So in a way, these three topics, security, identity, and freedom, are probably kind of trigger points for political polarization. They have to do with fear, with complexity, a complex world where we don't have easy solution, where we don't understand many things that are happening anymore, a feeling of insecurity, and also a feeling of powerlessness towards these phenomena. So many people probably don't see how they could have an impact on these phenomena and how to deal with them. So this also could be something that we can note for polarization processes in other contexts, not only in the political one, like for example in families, in firms, enterprises, in teams of different contexts. We will probably discuss that later on with experts. I'm not an expert on this kind of conflicts, but on political polarization. But I think that fear, complexity, insecurity, and the feeling of powerlessness can indeed trigger polarization and conflicts also in other contexts, also in the economic world. But for the political perspective, the important thing is that these feelings are fueled with ideology at a certain point. Again, if you look back in history, you can see that in the 19th and 20th century, we had several different cleavages, we call it cleavages in political science, between owners and workers, between church and state, and so on and so on. And political parties came out of these cleavages. You can see urban and rural. Urban and rural, I would say, is still relevant today, or is maybe, again, even more relevant than it was in the last decades. It's becoming more and more relevant. Also, if we look at voter behavior, for example, center periphery also still plays a role. But then, in the 21st century, new conflict lines and polarization comes into play, like the cosmopolitan approach and worldview versus the communitarian or nationalist worldview. The winners, the so-called winners of globalization on the one hand, and the so-called victims, or sometimes called losers, but I don't like the word so much, of globalization. Then climate activism versus climate change deniers, and so on and so on. And there is something which can also be said about the European Union and the political campaigns around the EU elections. We can have this cosmopolitan versus communitarian cleavage and compare it to EU versus nation state. We will find that very often. Democracy versus authoritarianism. So there is the attempt from different political players, very often authoritarian populists, to fuel the conflict with ideology. And they are highly professional by doing that. So they have strategies of polarization. Authoritarian populists and extremists and their professional helpers, sometimes paid, sometimes unpaid, they develop strategies to strengthen polarization and to fuel it with ideology. And they use fake news for that. They use hate speech. They are talking about division. Yeah. It's them who emphasize either you are on our side or you are on the other side. Either you are a friend or you are an enemy. Then they also work, of course, with manipulation, fear, and so on and so on. Us versus them. And when a populist says we, then he or she always pretends to be part of the pure people against a corrupt, bad elite. So you will find that always in populist speeches. I'm on your side, I'm talking for you against the corrupt elite. And this is an example, a very recent example from yesterday, from a Facebook posting, by which I want to just show you one of the very trivial strategies that can be used to polarize and to end a dialogue. The European Parliament posted yesterday this posting on Facebook saying media freedom is a fundamental right. On World Press Freedom Day, check the comments to learn how the European Parliament protects free media. And if you check the comments, then you will find further comments from the European Parliament, but you will also find other comments, like this one, who says, depends what media. If it protects the EU, is fine. It's fine, probably, he wants to say. If it criticizes the EU, they are funded by Russia. And then there is this emoji. 3 times he put this emoji. And this is one sign, one symbol for the end of dialogue. Who would continue a discussion with someone who is laughing at all the others? You could try it. You could try it. I did it several times. It's quite interesting to do that. And the result is that there is no basis for dialogue. These people don't want to get into a dialogue with you. And if you look at that, it makes something probably with you. It triggers feelings. Feelings maybe of hate, of shame, of anger. And this is, of course, not a good basis for dialogue. So you have different roles. I said that authoritarian populists, they use and they organize in a very professional way the polarization. And we distinguish different roles, like pushers, ideologists, communicators and strategists, sponsors and stakeholders, or frontline fighters. And you will find this kind of role types in all polarization processes. Political polarization is a highly organized and professional phenomenon. And of course, times of crisis are a very, very good time for polarization. And the new media offer many opportunities for anti-democratic populists and for polarization that are new. By the way, new media, also in the history, always triggered conflicts and were very often used first and foremost by authoritarians. You know that Hitler and Stalin, they used radio speeches very much, and radio was a new media at that time. So, what are the consequences of polarization? It spreads into all fields of society, we can say, and we know that. We had that several times today already. Families, schools, universities, workplaces, everywhere can polarization be observed. And the consequences are also triggered by a political polarization. They can be very harmful to our social interactions, to our relationships, because very often it is a problem for our feeling of trust into institutions, but not only into institutions, but also into relationships with others. There are many studies showing that trust in institution correlates with trust in your neighbor or in your colleague and so on. Lower willingness to engage in dialogue than the phenomenon fight, flight, or freeze as individual reaction, as a stress reaction to polarizing conflict. Then the emphasizing of contradictions and opposing points. The shifting of the focus from factual arguments to emotional disputes. And finally, mutual blame and the end of dialogue. But there are also counter-strategies, and there are many people and different professions working against polarization processes and against conflicts. So these two images show two strategies to prevent or to counter polarization. The one is bridge building, building bridges, which would mean bring together people from different backgrounds in order to discuss and to talk directly to each other. And the other one is democratic resilience. You can see on this picture the one who doesn't join, the one who resists. And strengthening democratic resilience or resistance can help to stop polarization processes or to slow them down. It is very interesting to see in different fields of research, psychology, but not only psychology, also political psychology, populism and so on, that one person who says no in a group can change everything. Yeah? Even in a big group, if one person says no to authoritarianism, for example, no to hate speech, this can change a lot. So breaking the dynamic on the structural, communicative and educational level is important. Structural level would mean organizing, participation, inclusion and so on. Communicative would mean the organization of dialogue, and the educational level is about competences of democracy and democratic culture. Okay, I'm coming to this graph that shows that we are in pluralist societies, and in pluralist societies we have to assume that conflict is something which is quite normal. But then the question is, in which direction does this conflict on a political level go to? Does it turn into a polarization that finally ends up in authoritarianism and violence? Or does it lead to a better democracy? Does it lead to what we call the benign polarization? This is an open question, and it depends very much on the societies and on the political climate, on the political culture, on the competences for democracy of the citizens. If drivers and pushers of polarization can turn the polarization into an authoritarian regime, for example, or not. And in our project about prevention of polarization and prevention of extremism, we are cooperating with different professional groups, very often with police and with social workers. Professional groups that at the starting point of the projects very often have a certain degree of mistrust, of mutual mistrust, because they come from different worlds. A social worker might be skeptical towards the policeman, and the other way around. But then, if you bring them together into a safe space where they can exchange their opinions and where they can find solutions for the prevention of like extremist movements or polarization, then this can be very, very fruitful. So bringing together different professional groups can help to turn polarization into a democratic dialogue. If it is not done on none of the levels, then it will probably be relatively easy for the polarizers and the professional politicians and parties to turn it into pernicious polarization, to end the dialogue, to say, we don't talk to each other anymore. We won't build a coalition government with the others, because that's absolutely impossible. And by the way, you can see one of the indicators for for political polarization is also that in many countries, and even ever more countries, it becomes more and more difficult to build government coalitions. So the waiting time for governments becomes longer and longer. And there are a few countries who have a certain tradition even in this, like Belgium, for example, but it's not the best thing for a democracy, obviously. Okay, so we believe that interventions are possible at every stage, but it becomes more and more difficult the more the polarization has already proceeded. So in the worst case, it can lead, as is written here, to authoritarian states, to state terror, to extremist movements, to violence. And in the better cases, so where social movements, for example, ask for more participation and for more inclusion, where minorities want to have voting rights and so on, then it can, in the better cases, go into the direction of a better democracy. Then one other thing is that I think we need to get out of the internet, back to the real world. That's also something that is done with the help of social workers very often, but also other professionals like teachers, like heads of sports clubs, trainers, cultural associations and so on, so religious groups, you can find many examples for that. Out of the internet back to the real world. That does not always mean that polarization can be solved, because as we heard at the beginning, we know it also from our families that we can have discussions at the table which polarize, and then even if we meet in this more or less safe space, we won't solve all the problems, but it's better than communication that is only online. And then this is a reference framework for competences for democracy from the Council of Europe. So in the year 2016-17, experts from the Council of Europe developed a model, a reference framework for the strengthening of competences for democratic culture. And they listed these different, what they call competences, its values, its attitudes, knowledge and critical understanding and skills. And I think that there is one of the competences that is extremely important for the mitigation of polarization processes, that is the tolerance of ambiguity. And the tolerance of ambiguity, you can find it in the blue field under attitudes, means that in a complex world, we need to accept that there are no easy solutions. We need to accept that we don't know everything, and we don't need to know everything. So if we are asked about something, we are not obliged to take a clear opinion always. We can accept that different people have different perspectives, and strengthening this tolerance of ambiguity is very important, I think, for mitigating polarization processes. And for each of these competences, by the way, there are methods how to train it, and in one of our projects we developed a handbook called Resilience Against Anti-Democratic Tendencies Through Education, where we collected, listed, and developed a few methods. But there are many more on the website of the European Council, on the Council of Europe. And then I'm already coming to the end with this slide saying that democratization is a long-term project, and it can be a long-term solution for polarization processes. Polarization is something that is in most cases not easy to tackle, it's not easy to manage or to mitigate. First thing I would say is to bring people together in real life, maybe in a moderated discussion, but of course that's not always possible. There are places where this can be done, like for example in schools, at universities, in conferences, also in firms and enterprises. And more often it is done, I think, also in the management world. But in general, it's not as easy. And in a situation as we had in the COVID-19 crisis, it was very difficult, especially with the social distancing and so on and so on. But polarization can destroy mutual trust, and that's why we have to build and to strengthen our trust by coming together, by discussing, by taking the perspective of the others. And I think the democratization of our daily lives does not stop at the political institutions. It can be done also in our daily life institutions. So I think democratization is the best prevention of dangerous forms of polarization. And in a super election year, as we have it this year with more than 70 countries with elections, it's of course it's on the edge. We don't know how many of these countries will remain democratic and how many of them will turn into autocratic or authoritarian regimes. But we can work on it. And of course, in view of the European elections, it is clear that we should also vote and try to get into the debate. Okay, that's all from my side. Now there is still the open question about the smoking laws. I don't have the answer, as I said, but maybe some points could help us to answer the question. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we do have some time now before the break for some questions, maybe for Mr. Pausch, on the topics discussed. So we do have our excellent bachelor students here with microphones. So rather than just yelling out your questions, it would be good if either a microphone is passed to you or you come to the side if you'd like to ask a question. Even coming down to the bottom of the stairs would also be helpful for us. That way our assistants don't have to run everywhere. But we already have a question from Khaled. So if we could head that microphone. So if others would like to ask questions, you're welcome to make your way down.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the presentation. The four fields that you mentioned about post-polarization that you mentioned, the insecurity, the powerless, which one of them you think that more has a a bad effect to the polarization when it comes to the people that they don't have a voice, they feel like powerless? Do you think that feeling that have the most effect on polarization to the violence, about like that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shall we collect or shall I? Okay. Well, yes, I think that I couldn't say if it's more the feeling of powerlessness or if it's more the feeling of insecurity, because I think that humans have these two partly opposing needs of belonging. On the one hand, they want to belong to a group, and they want to have security, and on the other hand, they want to be free. They want to have this feeling to can take autonomous decisions and to have a say and a voice in decision making. So I think in both cases, so when one of these needs is not fulfilled, then it can become a problem for democracy, and it can also lead to polarization. So It really depends on the groups that we look at, and on the feelings or the needs that are stronger. But in many cases, probably we can see that both is the case. So people feel insecure and they feel powerless, and then this is, of course, a problem for trust in institutions, for the feeling of self-efficacy, and all these things.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. Are there other questions? Yes, we have 3 questions over here. We're going to be busy this morning.
I can also speak up.
Just for the sake of the microphone, thank you. And we could take the other 2 while we're here in this zone.
Thank you for your presentation. I think it's really interesting also the term polarization, and I was wondering if the term itself maybe polarizes also because it's such a strong term, and it's hard to to break it down, because when we want to, for example, discuss different dividing topics such as, in the discourse we have, for example, gender or climate change. So we tend to put people into boxes when they have opinion on one topic. We know, I know myself, I think that they have this specific opinion on the other topic. So maybe it would also help to try to diffuse a little bit this polarization thing. I was wondering if that could be also an option. And then a question I had is, what is your take on the international factor of polarization? So, of course, it is important to start by working in our daily lives with students, also in the professional environment. But I would claim that it is a very, if not, the main role politicians play in this polarization, and how could we tackle this? Because if they, take up the topics and they politicize them, then it is really hard to try these bottom-up techniques. So, for example, if, somebody says, well, the West against the East, so I was wondering if you have an opinion on that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, maybe I answer the question and then we continue, okay? So, concerning the term polarization, yes, you are right, the term polarization, to a certain extent, polarizes itself. But I would say more in the public debate, because that's what I try to do with the help of the whole history of political science, is to say that polarization is not per se a bad thing. We can use polarization also for political mobilization, for bringing up topics that before were hidden under the surface. So polarization can be something that brings us to better democracies, and I try to show it with the historical examples. So maybe this helps a little bit with this terminological problem. And the other question is you said the international and the politicizing dimension. Yes, that's of course a big challenge, and it seems to be hopeless for the individual, and even sometimes for smaller groups or for associations working on mitigating polarization. But I think that's the only chance that we have. And by putting together the forces and the efforts of different groups, of different individuals, but also different interest groups, you can do something about it. I used to have a slide showing the different methods and instruments of depolarization with the responsibility of different professional groups. And if you list that, you can see how many ways there are to do something in the small world. And if you put it together, it's something that counts also for the political world. But it's difficult because, of course, the politician has the public attention, but the political parties have the money and the professional background to organize discourses and to put things on the agenda. So that's something where the civil society needs to fight against a big Goliath, but you know that David can win.
I like that you said the bridge building, dialogues and safe spaces are the key in the small groups that we might involve and be involved with. So it could be a classroom situation in one of your classes or my class. It could be in the Mensa, the canteen, where we might discuss an issue but realize that, okay, are we in a safe space to do this? And of course, maybe in this super election year where we're being fed a lot of information one way or the other, and it's very easy to fall into a space where we're suddenly, well, you said and I said and we're different. You're evil and I'm not, and so that's what you've really highlighted today, this benign polarization versus the more violent and aggressive version as well. Yeah.
And talking without spectators is so important, because on the big public level you usually have spectators, and they rate and they vote who wins and who loses. And organizing spaces where you don't have spectators but you only have participants, that's very important. And then they are multipliers and they can bring it to other spaces.
And you had that thought too when you shared the post. So that person who wrote, it's Russia or whatever with some emojis, could have been by themselves or with a friend saying, hey, look, let's leave a comment here, not realizing that comment would be shown here today and could then spread further on in other places and institutions. So we do have a sort of power to recognize that our voice, actually from the micro, could also affect the masses as much as we're being fed information from our political parties and so forth on that way to depolarize us. So unknowingly, we could be doing it as well. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Nina, from before? Wonderful. Aslan.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the influence of electoral systems on political polarization within a country, and whether implementing equal representation or proportional representation would reduce political polarization as opposed to having a majoritarian electoral system. Thank you.
Yes, that's also a big challenge, and the studies show that what is sold as division in reality is not is not there in this dimension. So of course algorithms and also different ways of manipulating statistics and things like that, they can help the pushers to paint a picture about society that is not true, and that itself fuels polarization. All we can do against it is again to be critical, to try to show that things are manipulated or not correlating to the real world. But it is very, very difficult with the technological development that we have, and with the very professional use of these tools by the professional populists. So it's not an easy answer, it's just a lot of work to do.
And we live in this world of deep fakes now. AI is really changing the landscape. You could see a politically orientated video that's actually fake.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know the difference unless it's been tagged in some way or it becomes known. So we can all fall victim of that. I certainly thought the Pope was a cool guy when he wore that deepfake picture a few months ago at Church and State, there as an example. So we had a question here, but I see the microphone over there. So I guess the microphone is here, but then we'd like to come back to that question here as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for your great presentation. So in your presentation, in one of your slides, you mentioned the three major topics of polarization, like security, identity, and also freedom. And you also mentioned that the climate change is like covering this both identity and also security issues in current years. And particularly into 21st century, there is also another debate like in climate activism and also in climate deniers. But in academia settings, we have seen that there is a polarization among the researcher and the scientists to do some research to answering some particular questions. On the other hand, we have also seen that there are a lot of deniers, both in scientific arena and also in politicians, like Donald Trump in US. And in social media, you also shown an example in Facebook that social media is also playing a role. For example, in terms of climate actions, we have seen there's a lot of fake news and also in misinformations. So my questions to you is that how EU is tackling all these challenges and depolarization process for climate deniers.
Well, that's a very difficult question, and to be honest, I can't say so much about the EU policy on that concrete topic. But what can be said is that I think in science there is really a very strong consensus about the consequences of the climate crisis. And then there are, of course, different approaches to deal with it. Science is in itself used to dialogue and is used to working with results that can be questioned. And this is important in any case. Yeah? But in this concrete topic, climate crisis and climate change, I think that the evidence is so strong that it's clearer, much clearer than in other fields, in other scientific fields. And the answers, or the question is always, do we have to convince those who don't believe in something, or can we try, at least at the beginning, try to approach it with dialogue, with asking what the fears are, what the problems are, what the needs are, and then you will still have a group that still would not be in favor of any measure against climate change. Yeah? But then it's about, I think that's one thing that we have to learn from history. We can't solve all the conflicts. Democracy means dialogue, but at a certain point it means majority voting. And then it's the fight about majorities, and this is something that needs to be done in the political game. But I'm convinced that we cannot solve all the conflicts and find a consensus on everything. That's just impossible. And that's also the reason why we need democracy, because it's a good method, a peaceful method to solve conflict, not to solve or to reach decisions that won't be satisfying for everyone. But if you accept the rule, then it's the majority to decide.
Thank you. So we had a question over here.
Yeah, thank you. So I was wondering, when I was looking at the trigger points, there were 4 points, and 3 of them I feel are very relatable, like, what was it, fear, powerlessness and insecurity, but you also listed complexity. And I wonder, on a personal level, what do you mean there by complexity? Because when I saw this list of competences, like the set of things a person should bring and go into dialogue, we had like knowledge and critical thinking of law, history, religion, like this very, very long list. And the world is growing more and more together. And even if this would not happen, I feel pretty much everyone is completely overwhelmed by what's happening. And so this set of competences, like who has that? And I wonder, just the complexity of the system, whatever the system is, it applies on pretty much everything, brings the feelings of fear and insecurity and powerlessness, because very often you just don't have an opinion. And I wonder your opinion on that, and what you meant by complexity as a trigger point, because I feel it needs to be considered a little bit different compared to the other thing. Thank you.
Okay, so I should have written feeling of complexity. That's the first thing. So it's the feeling that the world is complex and that overwhelms people. That's the one thing. And then concerning the competences, I tried to pick out this competence of tolerance of ambiguity, which in a certain way, I think means that we need to accept that we don't know everything. And you are absolutely right that no one has all these competences. That's an illusion. No one has all these competences, but nevertheless, it's good to list it as an ideal. And then you can approach it. But yeah, we live in a world where people are depending on computers. Every one of us. You mentioned artificial intelligence. That's overwhelming. Who among us would understand it? Maybe you much better than me, but I don't understand it at all. But we are depending on that more and more and more. So this is a way the world becomes extremely complex. You think back in the Middle Ages, it's not so long ago if you take the history of mankind, but these things were much, I would say, the world was a little bit easier to understand and to organize, also in terms of understanding the means of production and so on. And today we can't work without that. So I think, I don't know if it's an answer to your questions, but I would say no one can have all these competences. No one can fully understand the complexity of the world. No one, even the computer scientist won't understand everything because there are many other fields that are also complex. And one of the competences to live in a democracy is to be aware of this complexity and to say, well, I don't understand all of it. And then the question is, what is the consequence? How can we then take decisions? And then we are in another field of problem that's about how can we organize democratic decisions on complex issues. And there are ways, also democratic innovations like liquid democracy and things like that. I don't go into detail here, but it's just very shortly explained. It would be the possibility to give your voice to someone whom you trust and who has more competences on a certain issue than you, and let him or her decide for you. That's a model that is discussed in political science and in democracy research. That is, of course, far from reality in the moment, but maybe it can become more present in the public debate. Democratic innovations would be important as one way to deal with this complexity, I think.
I think in summary, we now need to move towards the break. So we'll hold questions for now, but Marcus will join us after the break. So there'll still be a chance once we've heard from our other speakers to hear his views on things as well. So thanks, Renee. I think we could really summarize it in just a few short words where you said that we have the opportunity to say no. So when we do see issues that are polarizing, we can stand there and say no, but at the same time, build bridges and build trust, as you said, trust in our institution, trust in our governments, but also within ourselves to build context with others, engage in effective dialogue, and move towards mutual understanding, seeing both sides of the story. So we're now in time for Kahoot. I'm sure many of you are addicted to your mobile phones, so pull them out if you haven't got them in hand already. And our organizers now will engage with our Kahoot game. But please, while you're doing that, put your hands together again for Marcus Pausch, please. Excellent. take their seats now, please, everyone. Okay, everyone, I do hope Bad Boy 22's in the room. We never know how he or she, how they got on. So I will now hand back to our wonderful bachelor students to tell us the results. I'm sure you're all waiting. Now, if your name is called, do come down the front. There are gifts for you. So, over to you. Bins. Is that short for something? Ich bin?
So in the second place is C3. Please come to the front.
CZ. Well done.
So at the first place is
Wow, wonderful to see that they're all my students. So, but yes, European Studies. Well done, everyone. Quick photo from Tonka. Great. Okay, let's give them another round of applause. All right, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Enjoy your umbrella on a grey, cloudy climate crisis day. All right, everyone, welcome back then to the second half. We'll now move to our discussion round and this morning on consensus or conflict. Let's just remind ourselves what we're talking about. So the English teacher in me says, according to Cambridge, consensus is generally accepted opinion or decision amongst a group of people. So we reach consensus through dialogue, discussion, perhaps even through voting, and as we heard this morning with Marcos. Conflict, on the other hand, is defined as an active disagreement between people with opposing views, opinions, or principles. And we see conflict between spouses or in extended families, between cities, and of course countries. While conflict can be healthy, more and more we see conflict in our society coming from a lack of empathy and concern for others. We need to listen to all views, as was stated this morning, then perhaps aim for consensus. And this is where conflict professionals can help us understand and learn more. So this morning you're going to hear from two more speakers who will each provide a shorter insight speech into their stance on consensus versus conflict. And after both have spoken, we will invite all three speakers back to the stage here to then ask questions and engage in dialogue as we did before. So what can you learn and how can you remain open to listen in this moment? Our first speaker is Ms. Martina Morell, who's a management consultant and executive coach. She's the founder of Time to Sail, which combines personal development training with sailing. And I know Martina has a special offer later on that you might want to talk to her about. She's also an expert in conflict management, and she helps organizations meet their post-digital challenges to unleash creativity and innovation potential. Martina is a member of our business faculty here at FH Burgertland, where she lectures in human resource management topics. So please welcome our first Insight speaker, Martina Morell, to share her thoughts.
let me bring you back to a situation which might have happened yesterday, might have happened a week ago, or maybe even a year ago. And please excuse me if this situation is not so easy for you. Think about your last conflict, your last debate, your last confrontation. And when you go back and thinking about that, how does that feel? What are your thoughts? Would you like to go back there and fight all over again? Or are you thinking about, ooh, run away, I don't want to be there? Yeah? Do you feel your heart rate rising? Do you feel your blood pressure rising? Do you feel the adrenaline coming in? So when you have a conflict situation, when you have a debate with a friend or with someone on the internet you don't know, lots of things happen in your body. Things you might enjoy or things you might not enjoy, depending on your conflict love. Do you love it or do you hate it? Do you try to run away or do you try to really use it? Yeah. So in a conflict, what you see is probably not the best version of yourself. You're limited to your words. This is why after a certain time you think about, oh my God, this is what I should have said. That would have been good, that would have been helpful. Because as soon as you're in a conflict situation, your stress patterns coming from a very, very old part of your brain, they take over. They wash you completely away. And you are in your stress patterns, and you might not like the person you see. You might also not like the person on the other side, probably, although this might be a friend. So hello to the stress patterns and to whatever triggers you. So the question is, what do we need? What do we need instead of these stress patterns? And this is probably the first thing you need to do, is to breathe, to step back, to think about, ooh, what is going on at the moment? Why am I acting in the way I am acting at the moment? And to think about how you feel, what your needs are, and how you could act and react instead of this, yeah? To be the best and the best version of yourself, the best version of yourself. So yesterday we've heard that emotional engagement is more important than rational reasoning in influencing people and winning their trust and cooperation. So when it comes to politics, emotions are important. And this is where you have the choice of, am I being washed away by my emotions? Or am I able to go back to my rational me, to think about what is it that I'm hearing here, and what is it that I want to discuss about, what is it I'm interested in. Yeah? So when we act based on our emotions, what can happen is that in a discussion, in a debate, you have the mindset of, let me tell you how it really is. I know the truth, and oh, I'm sorry, but you don't. But I'm here to explain it to you. Lucky you. Yeah? Fortunately or unfortunately, the other person is not grateful for that. They probably think exactly the same. So what you're having is you're having two truths, or maybe three truths, discussing with each other. Well, I invite you to do something different. To change one thing, and it sounds little and it is huge. So the next time you have a discussion, probably with someone you like, someone you probably love even, step back from let me explain to you and start all over with let me understand you. Think about that there is a person who has a completely different idea than you have. And instead of telling him, sorry, you are wrong, change your mindset saying, this is interesting. So you have a different opinion than I have. How come? Let me understand that better. What is it you see? What is it you judge? What is it you explain? And then see how the impact is on the topic, on the discussion, on your relationship. And that's one thing we heard yesterday that I thought is really, really interesting, and it is so crucial for you. Because in the first time, the different mindsets don't differentiate between age, and they don't differentiate between where you live in a city or in the countryside. They differentiate between your group. Obviously, young women are more liberal and progressive. That's what we've heard yesterday, and the young women here in the room can think, is this true or not? Yeah. And obviously, some young men
I would not say all, but some young men are going back to more traditional ways of life, more traditional values. So the chances are quite high that you might find someone you like, maybe even love, who has not the same mindset that you have. So what are you going to do with this? Are you looking so long to find someone who has the same mindset than you have? And when you diverge as a group, it might be difficult to find someone who is free and available and who has the same mindset. So obviously you, in your generation, you need to be much more tolerant than I have the need or have the need to be. Yeah? You need to learn to appreciate and to be respectful with different opinions. And let me understand you instead of let me explain to you might be a very first and very, very good and important first step to do that. And I invite you to do that and to enjoy it because it offers new possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Our second discussion round speaker now is Mr. Albert Hansen. Albert is the managing director of Linus Pharma, a company who prides itself on evidence-based medicine and is producing food for both medical purposes and products to assist men and women with fertility. Albert is also a football referee, and it is in this context that he'll also share his insights in around consensus and conflict. Albert is also a member of our faculty, our business faculty here at FH Burgenland, where he lectures on international negotiation and communication. So please welcome Albert.
Yeah, very good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to Fachhochschule Burgenland. I was a student here myself 25 years ago, so I'm always happy coming back. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much for a very inspiring lecture by both the professor and also Martina. My insights today are from the world out there. I'm a little bit older than the average of you, so I've proceeded in my professional career, and as David has just said, I'm also a referee in football, and of course there is a big difference, I would say, on the one hand side between dealing with conflict and consensus on a commercial level and as a referee. But at the end of the day, we're always dealing with a very similar group of people, and we are dealing with all kinds of people with different ways of lives, different religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. So as a managing director or working in a company, of course we are confronted with conflict every day. Conflict and finding a consensus, which basically is the final achievement that you want to gain, is nothing bad. Conflict fosters growth. Conflict fosters the way how you can communicate. Conflict fosters creativity on a negotiation table, for example. And avoiding conflict can lead to a much worse conflict at a later date. The question is how you deal with the conflict. And there is always at least two parameters when you're finding consensus. There is the content on the table, so the thing you're negotiating, you're debating about, but there's also the relational level, so how you relate with the other person. We've just heard it from the very inspiring speech before, whether you love the person or whether you have resentments against them, it's always about how you deal with yourself, how much you let your emotions come out, how much you're ready to listen to others, how much you're ready to understand their position, to understand their interests. Positions are easily expressed sometimes, but the interests behind are harder to find. So whenever you have the creative power in yourself to find what is the other side's interest, and maybe you can merge them with your interests, there is always, almost always, a basis for consensus. You just have to find it. The better of a communicator you are, the more easily you'll be able to find consensus. Now, as a referee, it's a little bit different. As a referee, you are an authoritative power, so to say, because there are rules that you have to enforce for the integrity of the game, for sportsmanship, just for the sake of the game that needs to be refereed. So it's less democratic. Football is not a democratic institution itself. I don't know if you know, there are just 4 countries that define the rules of football. These are Scotland, Wales, England, and Northern Ireland. They're not even separate countries, but they make the rules. And coming down on a referee level, there are rules that I have to follow. But some rules can be discussed, of course. So we have all sorts of people who like to discuss how I judge the rules. I don't know who of you has seen the cup final on Wednesday. It was a very controversial decision whether the goal was a goal or not. Yeah? You see a lot of debate, a lot of things that divide us again when we come back to finding consensus and conflict, different opinions. And sometimes even when you have clear rules, like in football, it's not a clear-cut decision. It is something that you can interpret. And here, it's the same. As a referee, I need to make sure that I do not give the people the feeling that I'm just executing the rules on the pitch, but I'm also listening to them. I try to find the people who are the decision makers. I try to include them as much as I can, but at some point, I have to end the discussion and say, well, I refereed it as that, and that's why this decision is final. Being a referee on the side is a very, very interesting experience. And at the end of the day, we're always dealing with ourselves, with the way how we cope with emotions, and how we are ready to listen to our opponents, so to say, or the people that we are communicating with. There is a lot of borderline behavior, of course, especially conflict is inherent. It's in sports. It stems from competition, different individuals on the pitch. We have teams, we have coaches, we have spectators, so we have all kinds of people that have a stake in the atmosphere that we are influenced as a referee. So yeah, at the end of the day, even if you have clear rules, if you abide to the rules, there is always place for interpretation. What can I say at the end of my introductory speech, so to say, on all sorts of negotiation, communication, where you have to deal with other people, it's most important to listen actively. I think the most neglected art in any kind of communication is attentive listening to what your opponent or the people sitting in front of you say. Many people think about their answer and they don't listen to the end. There's a lot of content lost by not listening actively. So listen actively, trying to understand why the other side has this position or this interest. It's always legitimate. They have a reason why they have an opinion or why they have an interest in something. The better you understand it, the better you can deal in a communicative situation. Understanding emotion is important, starting with oneself. Why do I feel about a situation? What can I do from my end to make the whole circumstance more positive, for example? I think this is one of the crucial factors, a key factor to a conducive, meaningful discussion. And at the end, I want to say it's always important to speak with the others, to take your time, not shorten it down to just explaining your position or listening to the other's positions, but really understanding why the others have an interest in what they say and what they do. And I think we are all called these days not just to vote on the 9th of June, which I think is very important for everyone, but I also think it's very important that we start with ourselves in all kinds of communication, that we learn about our behavior, that we become more open for the opinions of other people and to understand better where they come from and what we can do to a conducive communication. And with this, I want to thank you, and I wish that we get a lot of questions here on the table that we can answer, so it makes it also more interesting for you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So thank you, Albert. Now you've heard from all three speakers this morning. And so what we're going to do now is open up our discussion round, where again, I'd ask you to come down. We have our wonderful help here today. I wish I knew your first name. Leela. Let's give Leela a hand. So Leela is running around like a headless chook, we would say in Australia. So let's try to, where we can, I guess we can get a second mic perhaps, but do come to the side, share your thoughts. As we come to our discussion round, also get to the point. So if you'd like to share something, really make it clear for who you'd like to address from the panel, ask your question, and then of course we can engage in the dialogue as we go. So we encourage you though to have those questions in hand and see this as a good opportunity to practice your English speaking skills as well. So thank you to our three speakers this morning again. Do we see any questions already from the floor? So Khaled, you have a question? Everyone is ready. We have a microphone down here as well. So
My question addressed to Mr. Albert. As a referee, how you regulate your emotions, like in a tense environment, like where there's a heat, like, and also a lot of emotions going from the both sides. How you regulate your emotions?
His own emotions in this case, yeah.
As a referee, that's, yeah.
Thank you. It's an intelligent question. Thank you very much. Yeah, the point is, as a referee, you know what you are expecting on the pitch. Yeah, people become very emotional, not just the players. Sometimes, especially with young players, the problem are not the players themselves, but the coaches and the parents. So they bring in the emotion from the side. They put a lot of pressure on them. They make them behave sometimes in ways that I absolutely do not support. For me, this is a personal way. I think preparation is an essential part of refereeing. So it means when I warm up on the pitch, I try to spot how is the team composed. Does the coach have to say in the team, or is there a leader that I can somehow extract? Yeah? So I try to find my solution-making process already before I referee the game. Yeah? But on the pitch, of course, you have to actively slow down. I'm also sometimes finding myself being very emotional, but I try to calm down as much as possible, especially when I know that a rule is a rule and the people don't understand the rule. It makes it hard for me because we heard it before in the last lecture, when you know that you are right, and in this case, I know I'm really right. It's not a polarization, it is a misunderstanding on the other side if they don't know the rule, and in this case it's a clear rule. Yeah? So in this case I think it's difficult to keep our emotion down, but you have to.
And would you say further to that at this time when we think about young sports teams, are the coaches and the parents, you hear of helicopter parents or sideline coaches and so forth, is that a reality here with the teams that you're referring to when you see the young players out? Are they already creating a polarization at such a young age, or does it come at a certain level?
Yes, absolutely, but it's the other way around. Actually, with the age of 14 to 16, it ends. It abruptly ends. The parents won't watch anymore. They have their friends there. And the peers in the same age group, they usually behave better, I have to say. So the most critical age group I see is between 8 and 12-year-olds, where the parents are really trying to bring in emotion. They are shouting there. They're putting pressure on the players. They tell them what to tell the referee. So that makes it sometimes difficult to deal, because you have no educational rule really in that relation, but still you don't want them to act in that way, and you have to make a clear sign that they don't accept their behavior.
So a misinterpretation of the rules perhaps from the parents' point of view.
Exactly. And they put the pressure, and of course the children on the pitch, they follow their parents. It's fully understandable. Yeah? And when the parent yells something, he or she repeats it on the pitch, and then it's double difficult because you have to explain them and you can't speak to the audience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Great. We have more questions. Oh, yes. Thanks, Leela.
Thank you. So I would like to connect the different presentations that we've seen today. Coming back to the morning.
Sorry, we don't hear you. I don't hear you. Maybe it doesn't work.
Okay, so I start again, sorry. All right. So I would like to connect all the thoughts that we had so far. Now I bring together conflict, debate, and dialogue. So you were using the importance of dialogue, and now we talked about debate. I wonder about the aspect of time. Because also here we have a specific time management that we need. Okay, so you can bring up your thoughts, but you need to be done in like 5 minutes. But I have additional questions, but there is no time for the additional questions. So I wonder also, like in the political context, would a change in time management that more dialogue or more debate is allowed on a specific topic? Because as we've talked about today, we don't know so many things, so there needs to be more explanation so that more people can even bring up their opinion. So would that make a change? Are there some, I don't know, studies where you specifically think about time and what effect time has on debate and discussion and conflict solution finding, whatever it is? Thank you.
Okay. I start with the souvenir to former times when in the parliament, in the Austrian parliament in the 1980s, there were the marathon speeches from the Green Party, the members of the parliament, because there was no time limit for speeches in the parliament. So they then had to find rules and to limit the time of those who are speaking. So this is the other extreme. And then, well, you are right, of course, it makes a big difference if you have time to get into dialogue and to discuss things. On the political level, I think we also have to take into account the space, so the room situation. Is it a plenary session or is it a committee where it is more or less a safe space? So this is the second thing. Well, I think that a lot of what we know today is a tradition. It's something that came about over the years, so that the conference takes 1.5 days or so is something that is the decision of the organizers. And it makes sense because of the experiences from the past. So I can't tell you a perfect time frame, but I think we need to, of course, to have more time for dialogue, that's clear. And in times of acceleration, that's a problem and that's a challenge. But we also have to think about the room to build safe spaces where you can get into dialogue with different people and in a safe space where it's possible to say things that are not going public right away and so on. But no clear answer to that, just content that it's important, yes, to have enough time for dialogue.
If I may add another idea, think of the last conflict you had. Would more time have brought you closer to the solution or probably farther away? Yeah? So time is not the only part in it. It needs to come with the willingness to discuss a solution, to listen to each other. Yeah? And that time is possible to help and crucial. When you think of conflicts in companies, we differentiate between two types of conflicts, between hot and cold conflicts. And for both to be able to be solved, you do need lots and lots of time, because it's not only two people having a conflict with each other, but it's impacting the whole system. So if you have a hot conflict, these are the ones you really hear, people are yelling and shouting and screaming at each other. You need time to calm them down. If you have a cold conflict, these are the ones you feel. You can't see, you can't hear, and people might even deny, oh no, we don't have a conflict, everything's fine, and you know, oh no, that's just not true. Then you need time to talk with all these people who are involved on a one-to-one basis to make them able to talk about the conflict, because they just don't want to talk about it. So time and conflict management is really, really important. And when I come into a company and they ask me, come in as a mediator because we really need you, they do hope for a solution which is found in between a week or so. And I'm sorry to say, no, we do need time, because people have been hurt, feelings have been hurt, relationships have been broken, and that needs time to heal. Yeah, so time is crucial and not always helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I agree in most parts. What I've seen over the last 20 years that I've been professionally working is that for the sake of efficacy, of efficiency, so to say, everything has been cut down time-wise. So we have less time for meetings, we have less times to discuss a solution. And I have the feeling, and this is maybe a strong argument, but I see that people who are quicker, people who take up their voice, who speak, tend to have a bigger share in the decision-making than those who need more time for that. So sometimes speed kills the creative outcome of a negotiation or a communication, because some people just need more time, but they don't find the time. So yeah, some processes are good that they're regulated by time, that there is a cap, so to say, how long something should take. I mean, companies like Tesla, they make standing meetings. They meet and they stand up because they want to shorten the time. It's not necessary to spend a lot of time in there, and people will get, exhausted at some point. So there are artificial ways to limit the time. But I see that some people who have a very strong creative mind, who can really contribute, do not really get the chance because they just have no decent share in the decision-making process just for the factor of time. Yeah.
If we stick on time for a moment, I'm having a thought about, on the soccer field, is it 90 minutes or so, isn't it, that you have as a strict time, and then there's a buffer of time that's given afterwards. So does, in that moment, if we were to play soccer all afternoon, like a conflict lasting longer, then chances are we wouldn't be as effective or focused. So how much does time influence this idea of, you think of two teams, they're sort of in a conflict. They want to score, they want to win. So it's already, we're setting the boundary for conflict in a way, in an artificial way, on a sports field. So does time have a factor in the teams you've observed, for instance? Are there teams that, like you say, maybe go in with more energy, or others who see the way the game evolves in that sense, but they're still interested in conflict, or others who charge ahead? So any differences there, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a good point. I always say if as a referee until the 70th minute, more or less, the 70th minute, you have not been able to keep down the emotions, there's a high probability that in the last 20 minutes it will somehow erupt.
Right.
Because they get under time pressure. I also, when I teach negotiation here, time pressure is a very, very bad advisor to decision making. I've seen so many people making decisions at the end because they have to catch their taxi, they have to fly home, they want to go into the weekend, so they just make a decision for the sake of a decision. And on the football field, time pressure is a negative catalyst for emotions, I would have to say. Yeah? So the closer you get to the end, the more they're pushing. So as a referee, you're more happy about a clear result by the 70th minute, whereas otherwise it could become emotional. Yeah. And to precisely answer your question, yes, teams react differently to time pressure. There are those who are pushing positively, and there are those who are then trying just to, keep the game at an uncontrollable level. Yeah. So yeah, time definitely plays a role when it comes to emotions.
I imagine it's the same in the parliament as well, in the political systems now, where you can't have a marathon speech and talk for 16 hours straight if you want to. There are caps on things. So does it put same kind of pressures to either, force conflict or get those points out?
Maybe not the same way, because most decisions are made in the committees already, and not in the plenary sessions. In the plenary sessions, that's for the public, that's the public show, I would say. But it also depends on the importance of an issue, if it's decided very quickly or if it takes longer. But democracy needs time, that's clear, and we know that also, for example, from the Swiss democracy with direct democratic processes, they take even more longer than the processes in the parliaments. But yes, time plays a crucial role, and we need enough time to have good democratic, legitimate decisions.
Thank you. Some more questions now from the audience. You have another question, Khaled?
I have a question regarding the conflict. Do you see the conflict as a healthy thing? Or like, and what would you say to the people who always avoid conflict?
Some of us have studied the Thomas Kilmann conflict model in some of my classes, so they're familiar with this. The avoiders versus the competers.
It's difficult for them, to be honest. I work a lot with leaders in companies, and some of them enjoy conflicts, not very helpful again. Some of them like to solve them and are able to deal with conflicts in their teams. Yeah? And just yesterday I talked to a leader, and he said, I know I have to solve this conflict, but I just don't want to. It just doesn't make me feel good. I am afraid that I might solve it in a way that people will not be happy with it. Yeah? So for these people who avoid conflicts, and I'm sure some of you do, and that's perfectly fine. Yeah? but you need to be aware of the consequences. And deciding not to solve a conflict is a decision to keep the conflict going. You can't not decide. There's always a decision you made. Yeah? And then to think about in solving a conflict, and this is what I've talked about with this leader yesterday. I told him, you know, see it from another way. See that you are supporting your staff members to be better, to be the better version of themselves, to be more efficient in their job. Yeah? And me helping you with your conflict is helping and supporting you. It's not ruling, it's not starting a fight or something. And that was the thought. He thought, oh, this is interesting, because I am a supporter, because people who avoid conflicts tend to be those people who like to support others. Yeah? So in talking about a conflict, you are supporting others. And that was the thought he, and I'm sure some of you, find interesting. Saying, okay, that's more my nature. Yeah.
Do you also see that in companies, or I assume you might mix with other company leaders?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That was a perfect statement. The avoiding style, according to Killman, is for many people a more appropriate style than the competing. We should get to the collaborative at some point, of course. But avoiding also means that you are not developing your skills in communication, your skills in resolving matters. So if you ever want to really get into a leadership position, the avoiding style will probably not bring you there, really. Yeah. For some people, it's more of a task to learn that and to really go out of the comfort zone, because conflict resolving is something you can practice. I believe you can practice conflict resolving, but you also have a stake of your personality that defines how good you are at that. And there are different, I mean, we're dealing with people in 70 countries worldwide with all kinds of conflicts on the table, so to say. We have a third parameter besides the content and the relation. There's also the intercultural discrepancy that is just there. You either can handle that and can apply it to the scenario, or you have hardship doing that. So this is a very interesting component. I personally like it a lot, but I'm not the best conflict solver. I know that. I have people in the team who can do that better. But I have very good teachers, my daughters. They always find solutions. So they're the best negotiators in my team. But yeah, on a professional level, dealing with conflict is something you have to learn, and as a leader, you have to go out of your comfort zone to go there. Yeah.
Marcus, do you think people in the political arena go into the political avenues because of they're more likely to be competitors, or they enjoy conflict in a way? Because I mean, you watch political debate on television and so forth, and you see some heavy discourse, some heavy hitting in that way. And so, is there a tendency, a personality characteristic one could consider?
Yeah, there are many studies about that, which personalities are more successful in politics or who wants to go to politics. But on the other hand, there are also different types. And so I think you can also find in the political world, you can find those who are more the conflict avoiders. They are probably not in the first row. They are probably not in the leading positions, but they can sit in the back and have other tasks to fulfill. Or maybe it also differs on the level of the community or local level or national, federal level or supranational. I know from the local level that you have mayors who don't like conflicts at all and who are not very good in conflict solution or dealing with conflict. But I would suppose that on the national and supranational level, the world is harder and the politicians have more affinity to conflict.
There is a very interesting study. There is no hypothesis behind it, it's just a finding. And the finding is that managers in C-levels have more testosterone than non-managers. So the question is, has it been that before? Yeah? Or was it an impact of being in a C-level management? Yeah? And there is no hypothesis to that. I'm looking forward to, if some of you wants to, yeah? Could be a nice topic for a thesis. Yeah?
So the higher the ranking of the person, the higher the testosterone.
For male.
For men, right, right. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, women have some testosterone and estrogen, of course, in their balance. It'd be interesting to do a gender study on that.
But I think the question is whether the testosterone was there before and it made them sea level,
or whether it created the environment.
That's a very interesting question to follow
As a CEO, what would you like to share?
I don't know, I'm also teaching this red, green, blue Persönlichkeitsanalyse structure, so personality structure thing. I think that as a leader in a leadership position, you must bring in a lot of different aspects. I'm not the person to answer this hypothesis. I cannot tell that. But definitely, as the professor just said, there is a lot of pressure, especially in supranational politics, and I think the same applies to people in leading positions of companies. You have to deal with stress, you have to deal with conflict, and the better you are at that, the better you will succeed in your career.
Thank you. A question, yes, Eva.
Yes, thank you. My question would be to all three speakers, and Mr. Hansen already kind of began talking about this topic. Since you all work also, or two of you work in the corporate world, I wanted to ask about conflict management kind of in an international context. And if there's, of course there will be differences, but are there some examples where you really saw, okay, people from different countries really maybe even misunderstood each other in some cases? Thank you.
There are many, many examples to that. I remember it was 2 years ago, and what I do lots and lots of international leadership trainings, and that means that the whole group of 12 or 14 people is completely mixed. Yeah? So you have Americans in the room, you have people from Brazil, you have people from China, India, Japan, Germans, Austrians, Spanish people, and so on and so on. So quite a challenge, and that's something I've been doing for 17 years, and I really love that. It was 2 years ago, and they coached each other, and I was there supporting them in the coaching process. And the guy from India coached the guy from Japan in a leadership topic, and it was quite a challenging one. And then the coaching was over, and both have been very happy. And then the coach said, "Oh my God, exactly what you did and what you came up as a solution would be horrible in my place." So it's India and Japan, it's a huge difference. And culture is amazing, and culture is very interesting. There is in Japan, for example, it's a very low context culture, so you're not allowed to say anything, and keeping face is extremely important. So how, as a leader, do you find out what your staff members really feel? You, as a leader in Austria, you know they are going to tell you. Yeah? You might not always want to hear it, they're always telling you. United States, exactly the same. Japan people will not tell you, they're not allowed to. So what is there? There's even a name for it. Twice a year, a good boss brings his team members to a place where they drink, and it's called nominication. It's a combination of drinking and communication. So, true, you go there with your team and you give them lots of alcohol. And as soon as they had drunk and a sufficient amount of alcohol, then they are allowed and meant to say the truth. The boss keeps sober because a good boss uses this information later on to be a good boss and to know what is necessary for the team, because they will never tell you. Yeah? So there are many, many things in different cultures. Yeah? And again, as I said before, let me understand you instead of let me explain to you, brings you closer to these little tips and tricks they will later on tell you. Yeah? And it's a joy. So if you can be active in different cultures, do that. I think it's amazing.
It is, yeah, indeed, absolutely. So, conflict resolution, intercultural, you could write books about that. I absolutely agree. I have a difficulty sometimes. You notice inshallah in the Arab world means something like yes, no, maybe, we will see. My experience, about 70% it means no, but this is just my personal feeling. This is very similar to what we also have in some Eastern Asian cultures. As we just heard, they don't want to say no or yes, really. And you have to interpret, is this a yes or a no, or what do you still need? And this is sometimes very frustrating for us because we are used to dealing with people with a yes or no mentality. Yeah? We do it or we don't do it. There is a deal or there is no deal, but not a maybe there is a deal. This is one thing. And I was once in Jakarta a few years ago negotiating. We set the meeting for 11, and at 12:30 everybody got up, and they said they have prayer time. They need to go pray now. It was a big meeting. We were 6 people. They were 6 people, and they all got up and said we want to go for our prayer. And of course, the sentiment on our side was they want to look for an artificial break to somehow summon and try. But it was just the way how they live their religions. They will be back in 1.5 hours. So these are the things, if you're not prepared, next time we'll just set the meeting for 9 a.m. so then we're finished by the time they need to go pray. Or I think sometimes also the assimilation is not really healthy. Just because Japanese people bow when they give the business cards, you don't necessarily have to do the same play. Yeah? I think you have to keep your authenticity. At the same time, respect what is important for them. Why do they do this? So it's always a good middle way that you have to find in dealing with these situations. But you can learn a lot. It's fantastic. I would never want to do a job where I'm not out there in the world. So I love it, and I can really advocate also, like my colleague, try to mix with cultures, try to meet people from all over the world. You can learn so much for yourself and enjoy a diverse world that is just so great, despite all the bad things we hear every day in the news. And so people are very similar worldwide. Everybody loves his or her family. People have even similar values when it comes to how they want to be treated, how they treat others sometimes. So it's very diverse, and it's just there to be enjoyed as long as you live.
Thank you. Wonderful. And I'm sure many of you have experienced culture shock, so we might come back to that. But we have a question, Dimitula. Just for everyone to benefit from your question. Just a quick poll. Who's traveled to another country? Who's lived in another country for more like a semester of Erasmus? Who's lived in a country other than your home country for a longer period of time? Yeah, so maybe 6, 12 months or 10 years, like some of us. Yeah, could be very much. Good, okay.
Hello to everyone. So my question would be back to the company or the business world in this case. I wanted to ask that when we feel a conflict arising or that it is present already, and we already use everything that we have in our power to resolve it, and as you said, like we even take a step back, we think what the other person is thinking, or we can manage our emotions and everything, but from the other side, we are still getting that block. We are still getting that do not go through, and we are not getting this collaboration, even though we have used all of our options. What do we do in this case? Like, how do we proceed to find this collaboration with the other person? How do we move this block, let's say?
There's something you have to say goodbye to the thought that you are able to change other people. That's not going to happen. For those of you who are married or have been married, you might have tried. No way, yeah? Don't try. Well, often when conflicts arise and they are not able to be solved, then the problem lies within the leader. Because if a leader is not a leader, if a leader does not take on the leadership role and the leadership responsibility, there's a vacuum, and the vacuum is going to be filled with something. And quite often it's conflict. Yeah? So if a leader tells me I have a conflict in my team and they are not able to solve it, I'm always asking, so what's your part in it? Yeah? What can you do? Yeah? And 2 weeks ago there was a leader who had a problem with that. Yeah? And then we found out there were 2 people having a conflict with each other, and it has been a conflict for such a long time. It has been a cold conflict. It was horrible for everybody involved. Yeah? And then we talked about it, and he also talked to a colleague. He was in one of the leadership development programs. And this colleague of his, in a coaching situation where they talked about this, she was in the shoes, role play, of one of these people having a conflict. She says, you know what? I'm not having the conflict with this person. I'm having a conflict with you as a leader. Yeah? Because I need appreciation from you. I need that you respect me. And then he was like, oh my goodness, this can be so true. So he, being extremely reflective and a very, very good leader actually, he went back and he talked to this person. And 2 weeks later, which was this Tuesday, we had a team workshop, and he told me, do you see something? Do you see that they have a conflict? I said, no, I don't see it. I mean, I've talked to both of them 4 weeks ago when they had a conflict with each other. I said, so, what did you do? I said, you know what? I showed him my respect and my appreciation. I very often go to this person and ask for his ideas, his opinions. And now, with talking to one person, the conflict between the two of them has been solved. So sometimes it's not so easy how to solve a conflict. Sometimes it's... And aspirin is not the solution for headache, yeah?
Maybe 2 aspirins. But yeah, there is a very good master program here at the Fachhochschule Burgenland for International Business Relations where you will be taught about the Harvard negotiation principles. Yeah, I can really advocate that, where there is a theory about conflict resolution in case the other side doesn't play along. For example, the negotiation jiu-jitsu it's called, so there are a few techniques in theory, but as we've just heard, if you have someone like Martina who knows how to deal with that in a practical way, it's even more helpful. But yeah, there are some ways how to deal with that. At the end, it's all about how you act in a situation. It can be contagious. So if you are always returning to the content, if you're trying to keep the emotion down and so on, it's usually more difficult for the other side to stay very emotional. It's contagious. The better you behave, so to say, or the more professional you act in such a situation, the easier it is. You can also, for example, do breaks. It's very, very effective tool sometimes to make a break when you see emotions are high, stakes are high, emotions are high, that you call for a break. I once had, it was way back in 2014, we had 3 hours of discussion in Zurich with another company about a big deal and no solution. And then 2 people from our team and theirs went for a coffee break and a cigarette break. They returned 15 minutes later and the solution was on the table. So sometimes really breaking up, being disruptive in such a situation can calm down emotions and lead back to a meaningful discussion. Yeah.
Thank you. I would extend the discussion just a minute there about inner conflict. So while we're talking about, in that example, one person needed to be respected, but at the same time, so you help the leader to see that that's what would help, but how can we empower ourselves when we are feeling conflicted, I think is a good one. When we're avoiders, we're less likely to speak up, aren't we? And perhaps make our needs known.
Well, what I find is that many people are not connected to their real needs. Yeah? You know what you want to have, yeah? So there is, quite similar to the Harvard model, there's something which is called nonviolent communication. And it talks about needs and interests. Yeah? So it's exactly what the Harvard model is, no, with different words. And that's a way of communicating all the mediators worldwide use, yeah, because it's that mediation model. Yeah? And thinking about what is it that I really need in that situation to be able to speak my mind, to be able to not avoid a conflict, but try to solve it, to support people. This is the first idea of you getting to know, okay, so what do I need? Do I need security? Do I need appreciation? Do I need more standing? And if I had more standing, what would be different then? Yeah? So getting closer in touch with, in a situation in which you notice that you've been carried away by your emotions, think, what is it that I really need at the moment? Yeah? And this will give you an idea of how to solve it. And there is no one solution to it. Yeah? It's completely individual.
Because I'm reminded of your point, Marcus, about being able to say no. So if you're in a discourse with people and you're feeling conflicted inside, having that gumption to be able to say, actually, no, I have a differing view, or I don't wish to condone this any longer, can be a difficult step. So I don't know how many of you have, in the audience, have engaged in that kind of conflict, but standing up to parents or a situation, or you're in an employment situation as a younger person, you know. Any advice for anybody about how to say no in a way, tying into the comment?
I can refer to this handbook that I showed you. We describe one method that's called thinking of the rebellious moment in your life. And the thing is that we ask students, and I do it with my students in Salzburg as well, I ask them, think of a situation in your life where you stood up and said no against someone who treated you unfairly, or in an authoritarian way. And if you don't find an example from your own life, then think of someone that you know because you certainly have observed it somewhere. And then they should think about it, and they write it down, and then they should think about the consequences of this no. And the problem that we have in Austria, for example, and in many other countries as well, is that a no from children, for example, or from young people and from minorities and so on, very often is sanctioned, is put down. And this is an experience of authoritarianism. And so we have not so many democratic experiences in our daily lives that would strengthen this no. And learning it, I mean, it can be trained in citizenship education. There are trainings to do that. And I think it could also be valuable for other contexts like in enterprises and in teams and so on.
Thank you. Cool. So stand up in your rebellious moment, everyone. We have a question here with Gerda and then one with Khaled.
Thank you. I just have a question, as many of the students are from the program European Studies, Management of EU Projects. And when it comes to EU projects, we have kind of three main characteristics. There is a limited time. You are maybe in a leader position of a team you don't know, or at least a little, but very often you don't know anybody. And the third issue, it's very often very intercultural. So what could be, I know there is no quick answer I can imagine, but what would be an advice for the leading partner in this consortium? What could be done to avoid conflicts from the very beginning? Thank you.
Take the time at the beginning to make sure that people get to know each other. It's always connection before content. It's always sitting there talking about who are you, who am I, what is important for you, what is important for me. It's exactly when you do student programs with your colleagues, you do a group work, and you are not able to choose the preferred colleagues, yeah, but you are put in by your lecturer into a group. And you have different expectations. Because for some of you, it's like, ooh, 4, positive, that's what we do. We go for a 4, yeah? Some of you have the expectations to a 1 is the best and the most important thing. Yeah? So if you have never talked about expectation management, you will fight at the end because at least one of you is going to be unhappy. Yeah? And then you have a fight or flight or whatever. And exactly the same is true with all projects and teams who start working together. Expectation management is the most important thing. What is it that you expect? What is it that I expect? And respecting different expectations, yeah? Because your expectations bring you to the content, bring you to what you would like to contribute, yeah? And that's important, connection before content, and really openly talking about what is it we want to achieve. Yeah?
Thank you. We had a question here with Khaled.
I have a question for Mr. Morelli and Mr. Hansen. The other way, as a mediator, I mean, in a conflict, sometimes when it's going like an endless, you tend yourself to arbitrate, you know, like going more to arbitration rather than mediation. And for Mr. Hansen, as a referee, do you tend sometimes to mediate instead of arbitrating?
Mediation is not easy, to be honest, yeah? Because what you have to do is you have not only to be neutral, but you have to be there for both parties. Allparteilichkeit is what we call it in German, yeah? So you have to have lots of love for both of them, and you have to be very careful that you, as a mediator, you're not torn into the content, you support them on the process. As a mediator, I never, ever interfere with content. It is completely their solution. It's not my solution. And quite often I'm like, okay, this is the solution. Well, if they like it to be that, yeah. They would never know and see that I'm a little bit skeptical, yeah. So what I do is I provide the process, and the medians, they provide the solution, yeah. And you have to accept it as it is, and you have to love them both, yeah? And sometimes that's easy, and sometimes that's not easy. But that's what you learn in your education, to be sure that this is the role you are having.
Yeah, as a referee, to some extent, you're a mediator, not an educated one, but you have to act in that role because very often the dynamics of conflict don't just erupt between teams or between one team and the referee. It can be two teams against the referee, but it can also be the inter-teams. Yeah? And I don't know if you know the football rules so well, but it makes no difference if you yell at your own team member or if you yell at the other team's member. In any case, it's a red card if it's abusive language, so it doesn't make a difference. So sometimes you have to mediate, especially between teammates who have different emotions, and you maybe have to explain to the one why you have refereed like this. Yeah. So yeah, you're 90 minutes under stress because you're always criticized by someone. Someone is never happy. You always have to make very quick decisions and you have to defend them. So this is again a difference to the corporate world or to the politic world. When we resolve a dispute, there is very little space for interpretation when you're a referee. That's maybe the major difference, I would say. And sometimes, yes, you're a mediator. And sometimes I feel really sad for the players when I hear, again, coming back to the parents, when they interfere and give and transport some values that I think they're not correct. But I'm also somehow, like my colleague said, you don't interfere in the content. It's their education towards their children. I'm not the educator on the pitch, but I have to make sure that they abide to the rules.
Thank you. Renata.
Yes, so I'm curious about I want to go back to the cultural differences that was mentioned. We are aware of the fact that it's important and we have to consider, but on the other hand, there is also the concept of universality, that there are some rules that no matter the context, you have also to adhere. And I was just thinking, in your opinion, or in what the study shows, that how, as a negotiator, for example, you have to balance these, the importance of considering these cultural differences, but also adhering to these rules, universal rules that should be followed no matter the context.
What would such a rule be? The universal rule? Would it be respect? Is that what you're thinking on? Yeah.
There's also the golden rule, do unto others as do unto yourself. Or
well, I'm not quite sure about this one, honestly.
Culture, right.
Yeah. I don't think that you should treat others how you would like to be treated. I think you should treat others how they would like to be treated. Yeah. So if you treat a Japanese person like you would like to be treated as an Austrian, oh no, don't do that. Yeah. So it's always important to have a good idea of what does the other person need, what is important for them. And in a conflict situation, in a negotiation, that is extremely difficult because you're so much on your own agenda. Yeah? And so the question is always, whose agenda are you on? Are you on your own agenda? Are you on the other person's agenda? Are you on the solution agenda? Would you like to have a result? Are you really open to a result? Yeah? So there are many things which are true worldwide. Yeah? And one of that, in my opinion, is have a clear understanding of what is important for you and have a clear understanding of what might be important for the other person, and ask what's important for you. Yeah? Go into a dialogue. And this is a universal thing. Yeah? And with some cultures it's going to be easier, but also Austria. I mean, we don't only have one culture, and sometimes people in Vorarlberg, I don't even understand them. Yeah? And I'm from Vienna, and I work a lot in different parts of Austria, and I still say that I'm from Vienna, although some are not smiling when they hear that. Yeah? So we do have different cultures. Yeah? You also have different family cultures. You have a different culture with your friend. Yeah? So it's also, you have all different cultures, not because you have your origins in different parts of the world, but because you're individuals. Yeah? And making sure that whoever you are might not be the same as how the other person thinks and feels. That helps a lot worldwide, and in Vienna and in Austria. Yeah.
So it's a mindset.
It's a mindset,
really,
and it's
a universal mindset.
It's about curiosity.
Yeah. And do you think that we're getting, sorry, you speak first. I was just going to say, do you think we're getting better or worse with that in this current age from all of you, you know?
I think we're getting so much worse, honestly. And the topic is that we are not brought up with that. Yeah. I don't know how many of you have been brought up by your parents in being self-reflective. I know many, many leaders who have a huge problem with being self-reflective. And for me, for a leader, one of the biggest and most important competences is to be self-reflective. Yeah? To sometimes don't take yourself too serious, probably. Take the other person serious. Yeah? And think about expectations and what is important for you. So that's something, if you have children, try to be a good role model for them, yeah, to be self-reflective. As a leader, try to be self-reflective. That's nothing you might have learned, but it's something worth learning for you.
Yeah, start with yourself, as I said before. I think this is a good preparation. And then there are the Hofstede cultural dimensions that you've surely heard about, and I think this also defines somehow how a negotiation or communication works out internationally. For example, the principle of power distance. We in Austria have a low power distance. It means that even middle management on a negotiation table can bring in arguments. If you speak to someone from Malaysia, for example, or Philippines, I'm going there next week. Philippines is, there is one boss who makes a decision. The others just, they can give their comments, but not openly. So it's a question, for example, is who do you negotiate? Who is really the problem solver on the table? Who can make the decision? This is sometimes a question of preparation as well. I wouldn't say these are stereotypes. Not all Filipino companies are like this. Yeah, I don't like this generalization, but more or less these are prototypes, so to say, of how we expect them to behave. Yeah, and I share your view that there are some general rules that are established worldwide, and it's being treated with respect. But there is a big difference in aspects of time, in aspects of power distance, as I said, in aspects of showing your body language and so on. And you should adapt a little, but I said before, you should also be authentic. You should not reflect or mirror the other side just to please them. I think it's the right way is an authentic way in the middle where you respect their values, their needs. And you, at the first point is that you understand them. Why is it like this? When they take a long time and talk about family half an hour, this is high context. Yeah. This is a question of preparation as well.
And in the political context, Markus, you know, I'm just thinking now as you speak, this is wonderful. You know, we need to be in the middle. But if I'm the representative in the EU Parliament for my country, for the country's values, there's a conflict there potentially. So how much do people have to put aside their own mindset in your experience in understanding this scenario and to represent their countries, which could have very differing interests within the parliament?
Yeah, that's a very special question and a big problem, of course. So the idea of the European Parliament is not to represent the national interest. The idea of the European Parliament is to represent the interest of your voters, and they vote for political parties. So normally you don't have an Austrian will in the European Parliament, but you have several and different Austrian members of Parliament who represent their parties and their ideology, and so they might be, or often are, closer to their pendants from other countries than to other Austrian members of Parliament. There are only a very few topics where Austrian members of Parliament in the European Parliament act together, like nuclear energy, for example. That's one of the very few examples.
Okay. Some more questions? We have time. Nina, okay.
So my question is about the generations. So when it comes to generations, I observed that different generations have different approaches and dealings with the conflicts. So as a leader, how do you decide how much space you give for conflicts in your company or in your system?
solving conflicts always first. Because if you don't do that, it's going to be bigger and bigger, or a hot conflict, if it's not allowed to be solved, is going to be a cold conflict, and then it's very, very difficult. I remember a time when I was young, it's quite a while ago, honestly now, BAWAG, had a pamphlet given out to the leaders, telling them about the new generation, that has been me, about the new generation coming into and how they should treat this generation. So the generation topic has always been there, and it has always been tough for the older generations to deal with these youngsters who obviously seem to be crazy. And so there has been a pamphlet, honestly. And exactly the same question now, I don't know, 30 years later, are asked by the companies, thinking about, how should we treat these crazy youngsters? And it is a question of the company, how they treat them. For some companies, they have a completely different time frame. One company I'm working with, for example, very old, very traditional, amazing company, very successful. And what they do is, if you are there for 5 years, you are a rookie. 5 years is nothing. For other companies, 5 years is like you're the most senior in the room. So it depends on the companies a lot, and it depends on the leaders. And I find it amazing how 27, 28, 29-year-old people are so dynamic and have so many great and wonderful ideas. And I think use them, use these ideas, use these new ideas. When I remember when I was young and as a woman being a consultant, when I was, for example, 23 years old, 27 years old, I already had some time of experience. A woman, 27 years old, looking younger than she was, it was a tough time because people would not take me serious. It took an hour, so they listened to what I had to say, or they worked with me for an hour, and then I've been like, oh, you are actually really good. And this is the truth, and it has been the truth 30 years ago, and it's the same today. Although I think that it has changed, it's better now, I guess. There is more respect, in my opinion, for youngsters than there has been before, but now I'm in the other parts of the shoes, so maybe you would say it in a different way, I don't know.
Anyone else wish to comment? You're welcome.
Maybe just one statement about the generations in politics. I looked up for an article that I'm working on. I looked up the age of the members of European Parliament, and you will find that we are living in a world where people between 40 and 65 are those who are best represented. That needn't be a surprise, or probably isn't a surprise, but it can be a problem for democracy, because there is the idea of substantive and descriptive representation, and that would mean that the age groups should be represented in a way that comes close to reality, and that's not the case. We live in a world where the 40 to 65-year-old are ruling. And the rest is not doesn't have the same influence in our society.
A question here, Anastasia.
Hello everyone, my name is Anastasia, I come from Georgia, and right now my country is very, very polarized because there are lots of discussions around the new law that the government is trying to pass. And my question is the following. What's the strategy and what can be the strategy to reduce the number of misinformation around the social media networks or internet? Because we are living right now in a digital world, and that's a really, really tough and important topic. And because of this misinformation, lots of people are going into incorrect direction, and this causes more and more polarization. And my question goes to Mr. Pausch. What can be the strategy against this one? Thank you.
Yes, we have to think about different actors in the field. So what can be the strategy of those who are in a parliament or in a political function? They should pass laws that are strict against manipulation. That's trivial, but it's crucial. And then the next step is to control these laws. So the European Union can do something about it. And of course, in the European Union's policy with neighboring countries or with candidate countries as Georgia, they want to assure that these laws are respected. So that's the first thing on the judicial level, and then you have other players. You have the critical media. You have critical NGOs. As long as they are able to act, they need to counteract. They need to try to provide fact-checking and counter-speech and entering into this virtual space to deconstruct the misinformation. And then there is civil society, and there are NGOs who have the specific task to fight against this. So you can find them on the social media with different hashtags, and they are more or less loosely organized. But I think, and then of course every citizen can be critical, but that's all that I can say about it. It seems to be trivial. It's difficult, but there is not the panacea to solve it.
It sounds like the first part of a process. I mean, if you detect that this could be a piece of misinformation, then broaden your search. You know, if we're in the academic realm, you wouldn't rely on one article to justify your position. You do a literature review with hundreds of articles and a deep analysis in that way. So in this sense, okay, go and ask the question, engage in dialogue, seek the opposition, maybe have some discourse, being able to look at both sides. Start with yourself, from what we've heard today already in this moment as well. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we face. Also with the emergence of AI, I wondered, is that a new cleavage that's coming? You mentioned these cleavages of church and state. Is there going to be, in your opinion, Marcos, anything that we could look out for in the future? You know, AI is a much bigger topic than what we've got time for, but any thoughts about otherwise future cleavages?
Yeah, I think it's something that's not yet on the surface, but we know that it will come. And the question is if our societies are aware enough to tackle it, because otherwise the gap between those who use this technology and those who produce it and have the knowledge to produce it will be enormous. I mean, anyway, we are already in this because, as I said before, we are users and we are depending on so much technology that we don't really understand and that we cannot produce. So we don't have the means to produce it, we don't have the knowledge, and this is something only for a small elite. And if this is not democratized, then we will really, really have big problems in the future, I think. And maybe it won't be a polarizing issue because it's all under the surface, but that would be even the bigger problem. I hope that it will be polarizing.
Yeah. Wonderful. Are there some other questions? We have time for a couple more, I think, with our timing. 5:30. Oh, okay. So we have one last question up the back.
So sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. You have the microphone, please.
So my question goes to Mrs. Morel. I was wondering, when you talked about how to deal with conflicts in general, that they always need to be solved, is there also a cultural difference there? My question comes from an experience with Japanese people. I also talked about Japanese. And from my experience, when you get to know a person and there might be thoughts where you would run into a conflict, then these thoughts are just not expressed. So you accept that there are things, okay, this is not a good thing to do, because we might run into a conflict. So we accept that that's the case, but we just live on and we don't talk about this. So, and when I realized, or now I was realizing that from my Austrian thinking process, if there is an issue, I want this to be done. So it's yes, no, solved or not solved, and then I go in a different direction. But yeah, and so I was wondering if, because I guess I was just bringing one example, there might be many, that the acceptance of there are conflicts where we don't need to solve it might be an issue.
I think it's important to choose your fights and choose your conflicts. And it's perfectly fine that different opinions don't need to be a conflict. Yeah? It could be that one person has opinion A and the other person has opinion B, and they don't interfere with each other. They are not having a problem with each other. They do not suffer because of the other opinion. So then it's not a conflict. It does not need to be solved. Yeah? So accepting that other people have different opinions is a wonderful way of living together. It's not always that we have to have the same opinion. Yeah? So you don't need to solve every conflict. You only have to solve the ones which are there, which are important, which are relevant. And sometimes it's okay to say, that's interesting. You see it in a different way. That's okay for me.
So one last question now.
Just one very short comment to that. My experience has shown me that these conflicts that are important for a party will come up at some point. So some conflicts, they seem to disappear because it's maybe a low context society that just don't touch it. And then it seems to be gone. But at the end of the day, it comes up at some point again. So everything that's important for you, I just did this recently with a partner from East Asia, where we thought we had something not discussed and he's fine with that. And 2 months later, it came up again. And it was more of a problem than had we solved it 2 months ago, to be honest. So it was a learning process for us. If you see that this is going to be a problem, don't be grateful that they don't touch it, because we'll come back at some point.
So I think now I can talk to you. Thank you very much, not for having the last word, but maybe the last question. The question would be, because we have been talking about misinformation, disinformation, and also pluralism and many opinions that have to gather maybe also in digital media environment and so on. And I think we might have the problem with over-regulation, because as you can see in Facebook and so on, we have many social guidelines. So many people got blocked and deleted because they are not applying to these guidelines and so on. And we also have in the Union the Digital Service Act with red flaggers and also with fact checkers and so on. And I think it's very dangerous, because who decides what is true and what is not true? And which NGOs are deciding about this truth, and who are the people who delete comments or persons in the internet and so on, because this is a very important environment, because here opinions are built actually, and here you get your opinion, what you vote and so on, and if you over-regulate it, this would danger democracy. And on the other hand, okay, we have things like Elon Musk with Twitter, or now X, and they have more softened guidelines. So actually many people think here you have more opportunity to express your free speech. How can we save our right for free speaking in our community? Because I think this is very much in danger in Europe.
Well, you are right that it's a difficult question, and it's a sensitive field, definitely. But on the other hand, looking at what is happening in social media, I think the problem that we have now is that these rules, the rules that exist, and they are not very strict, that they are not fulfilled by the big companies like Meta or Twitter and so on. So it's it's a question of perspective, and as I said, there are rules, and these rules I think are not too strict. They still allow for open exchange and for the expression of everyone's opinion, but they are again against fake news, they are against hate speech, and this is relatively clearly defined, although it's not always as easy, but it's not executed as it should be because of the problems that we know with global companies that are not so responsible to the nation-state legislation or even the supranational legislation. But the European Union is now again, I think, controlling Meta and other companies. So yeah, I think that's the point. It's a sensitive field, but in my opinion, problem is more the execution of the rules that are already existing.
Wonderful. Well, on behalf of the FH Burgenland, and I'd like to close this EU Business Forum now and really thank Albert, Martina, and Marcus for their time today. So please put your hands together for our three speakers. So in bringing today to a close, I would like to again thank Leila and her team, and of course Professor Bright for the input that we've had in putting this whole event together. So it's been a pleasure. Our guests will head downstairs to the aula there where there's a refreshment and some food, which you are also welcome to join into. We do have one last special request. So our European Studies students should assemble on this side for a quick moment that Gerda would like to have with you as well. So if you're not in the Masters of European Studies, you can go out that door. And if you are, then come to this door. Thank you, everyone. Well done.